One of the new additions to the CompTIA exams is the idea of cutting and crimping your own cable. I think this is a really good idea because people who are working on networks, even at the most basic level, should have an understanding how this works. Now don't worry, I'm not going to turn you into a professional cable puller, but at least get you some of the basics. So to start off, what I want to do is just take a look at a piece of networking cable. We call this Ethernet cable, but the more official term is unshielded twisted pair. Now if you take a look at unshielded twisted pair, and by the way, unshielded twisted pair, or better known as UTP, is always going to have 4 pairs in it in order to work on a network. You can get UTP with, say, only 2 pairs, but that's going to be used for like telephone systems and things like this. But what I want to do is start off by taking a look right here, and you'll see the word right here. Do you see where it says Cat 5? Cat levels are important because different qualities of unshielded twisted pair cable can handle bigger amounts of data. And UTP has been improved a lot. It's 40 years old, and it keeps getting better and better, but you have to make sure that you have the right kind of UTP for the speed of network you have. So to make it easy, we have what are known as Cat levels, all right? Now, luckily for you, you don't have to memorize them all, but here are the ones that are mentioned on the CompTIA A+ competencies. First of all, there's Cat 3 cable. Cat 3 cable basically was designed to run 10 megabit per second Ethernet networks. So we see a lot of Cat 3 out there. However, when 100 megabit Ethernet came along, they needed a new kind of unshielded twisted pair, and they came out with something called Cat 5. Cat 5 was fantastic, except for one little thing. What people forget about is that when we're talking about cat ratings are not just the cable. All of the other little pieces that go along with your structured cabling also get a cat rating with them. For example, this patch panel right here is rated Cat 6. So even though Cat 5 cable ran 100 megabit Ethernet just fine, the problem is that the patch panels and the little crimps and all the other little doodly flageties didn't, and as a result they had to redo the standard into what's known as Cat 5e. So Cat 5e is really designed as an improved 100 megabit per second, but they did it so well that you can actually run 1000 megabit per second or 1 gigabit Ethernet for shorter distances on that same cable. Now, as gigabit Ethernet came along, there was a motivation, because there was even another gigabit, 10 gigabit coming down the pipe, to create an even better cat level, and that's where we saw Cat 6. Cat 6 cable is designed to run 10 gigabit Ethernet, but only on shorter distances. So if you need to run 10 gigabit Ethernet, Cat 6 is the way to go. There's even an improvement on that, and I don't think this is on the A+, which is called Cat 6a. Cat 6a is designed to run a magic distance, 100 meters. Pretty much all buildings or anybody who's going to be running networks design their entire building in such a way that they can have telecommunication closets always within 100 meters of anybody. And as a result of that, pretty much all Ethernet standards that run unshielded twisted pair always dictate 100 meters. So that's why that's very, very important. So Cat 6a is out there too. All right. Now that you've decided on what kind of network you're going to be running, in particular, one of the things you need to worry about is, what's my cat level? So let's say you're running an old 100 megabit Ethernet network. You got a 100 megabit switch, 100 megabit NICs. So you'd sit there and go, well, Mike, I can get away with Cat 5. Well, you can, but what are you going to be doing in 5 years? In general, when it comes to pulling cable, we pick the most expensive cable we can afford, not because we need it today, but because we need it tomorrow. All right. So what I want to do now, let's talk about actually making some of these cables. Let's start off right here. Now, what I want you to see very, very closely is if there's a color coding on the side of this jack. On this side, it just says 4587. And then if we flip it over the other side, it gets a little bit more confusing. It says A and then B. What you're looking at there are the two cabling standards that we use within network cabling. They're called the EIA-TIA 568 standards. There's 2 different ones. Now remember, we have 4 pairs of cable, which means we have 8 individual wires to deal with. So let's take a look at the EIA-TIA 568A and then the EIA-TIA 568B. So the interesting part to memorizing the difference between A and B is that if you're punching into a jack like this, or even into a patch panel, they have color coding on them that makes it easy for you. You don't have to memorize anything, just follow the color coding and you can do either A or B. Where stuff gets a lot more interesting is when you're making your own little patch cables. So let me show you a quick little ditty we can do that will help you memorize the difference between 568A and 568B. All right, now what I did is I stripped off a little over an inch of insulation off of this piece of UTP, and now you can see the 4 pairs very, very clearly. Now, to organize these pairs, the brown is always going to stay, well, oriented to me, it would be to my right, so I guess it would be to left on the camera. The brown always stays to one side. The blue always stays in the center, and then you either split the oranges or split the greens. Let's do this twice and I'll show you what I mean. So first what I want to do is I'm going to split the oranges. Now as I split the oranges, notice how they're split between the blue. The blue never moves, the brown never moves. So it starts with a B, it never moves. And then I'm going to untwist the greens. And let me go ahead and untwist the browns and the blues while I'm here. There. So, notice that the brown always stays in the same place. Oriented to you, it's on the far left-hand side. The blues always stay in the center. Now I have the green and the oranges are split between the blue. Do you see that? So here's how you remember. The B's always stay in the same place. Now, green comes before orange, so that's A. That's alphabetical. A for alphabetical. If I want to do B, I just reverse where the greens and the oranges are. Now look at these very, very closely. When we talk about these individual wires, we say things like green, green, white, orange, orange, white, blue, blue, white. And you can see where that comes from because one of the wires always has white with a color associated with it. So the other thing to notice is that the order I've got it in. When they're properly wired down, it's something white solid, something white solid, something white solid, something white solid. So I've done a 568 A and B. Okay, now that I've got them in the proper order, I really don't let them go. I'm holding on to these like crazy. And what I'm doing is I'm straightening these out, making them nice and straight. There's a little piece of Kevlar, a little fluffy piece of Kevlar that comes inside the cable. That's just to give it tensile strength so you can pull it. I'll just push that out of the way. So what I'm going to do now is I got them nice and in order. And let me show you what this looks like. So I've got them all nice and lined up now. You see I've kind of given it that flat broom shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut so it's about ½ inch. Now I want you to look at this crimp very carefully. You see how we've got the tab piece on the bottom? That's important. You don't want to put it in like this. You want to put it in like this. And we slide it in. Now, I've slid them all in, and this little crimp has little vampire things that will punch through it when I hit it with a crimper. So what I'm doing is I'm looking to make sure all the wires have gone all the way up into the top. And I'm also going to take a moment to look one more time to make sure everybody's in the right order. It looks good. You'd think I'd done it before. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a crimper. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that in there. Hit it with a crimp, and I have made my first 568A connection. So to do 568B, remember the same rules. All you have to do is keep the blues and the browns in the same place, except this time orange stays in the front and you split the green. So orange before G is not alphabetical, so no A because it's not alphabetical, it's B. Cute little trick, huh? All right. One more thing I want to do, and that is, let's go ahead and take a look at how to do a 110 punch down. It's really easy. All right, now this is the back of a patch panel, and these are 110 punch downs. What I'm going to be doing is using this tool called a 110 punch down tool to punch down all 8 wires individually. Now, I'm reading in the back, and it says, A, I have to start with the green pair, and then the orange, and the brown, and then the blue. Now, that sounds very different from what I just taught you, and it is. But keep in mind that the people who build this patch panel, they can adjust the wires inside. So even though I'll punch them in the way they're telling me here, he'll go ahead and on the connector on this side, we'll make sure that it's A or B. So usually what we do with these guys is we just push them down. I'm just going to do a couple here. So you see what I've done is I've pushed 2 of the wires down, and then I'm going to take this tool. Now notice it's got one end that's going to cut the end off, so you don't want to do this backwards or you'll make a mess. So there's little leftover pieces. Off they go. And I just keep going down like this until I punch all the wires in. So making your own cables really isn't that hard. I will warn you though that if you're trying to do this with Cat 6 or Cat 6A, you actually need more robust tools and it can be a bit of a challenge. Okay, the last thing I want to mention about these types of cables are something that's known as plenum versus PVC. There are actually 3 fire ratings. When we're talking about fire ratings, we're saying if I have a fire, what's going to happen to this outer core? Is it going to catch on fire and like burn all up my whole building? Is it fire resistant or what? So the 3 ratings are from worst to best. PVC, which basically means no fire rating at all, and it's going to make lots of noxious smoke and stuff, and you don't want to put it in your walls. Riser is actually designed to run between floors in a building, and riser cable is better than PVC, but not as good as plenum. Plenum is the standard best type of fire protection you can get. Plenum is the standard for just about every horizontal run. Most of the time, when you're installing these types of cables, you're going to be required by law to use plenum. Make sure you know that PVC isn't as good and plenum is the way to go for fire retardation.